There's a guy in your office that maybe you know him specifically. Maybe he's just a composite of three people you've worked with, but you know the type. Makes $140,000 a year, has the apartment, has the car, not a bad one, a genuinely nice one, the kind where you notice the brand before you notice the color, goes on the trips, posts the trips, has the dinner reservations at the places where the menu doesn't have prices on it because if you have to ask, and so on. And then one day, completely casually, he mentions he has basically nothing saved. Not in a distressed way, just factually, like he's reporting the weather. And yeah, I don't really have much put away. And you're standing there doing silent math because you know roughly what he makes, and the numbers don't add up in any direction you try to run them. That moment, that specific disorienting moment, is what this entire video is about. My name is Miles, and today we're talking about the thing that almost nobody in personal finance wants to say directly, because it implicates too many people who are otherwise doing everything right by every visible metric. A high salary does not make you wealthy. In 2025, in dozens of American cities, it barely keeps you afloat. And the gap between earning well and building wealth isn't bad luck or bad math. It's a set of invisible system traps that are specifically calibrated to expand and consume whatever income you feed them. The more you make, the more aggressively they scale. And most people never identify them because the traps don't feel like traps. They feel like rewards. Let me put two people in front of you because the contrast here is genuinely uncomfortable, and I think it needs to be felt before it can be understood. Marcus is 38, lives outside Chicago, software sales. He's been clearing $145,000 a year for the last 6 years, with some bonus years pushing closer to $160,000. By any conventional measure, Marcus is successful. His apartment costs $3,100 a month. He leases a car at $680. He has a 401k. He contributes enough to get the employer match around 4%, because he read somewhere that you should always get the match. He travels maybe 4 times a year, eats out 4 or 5 nights a week because his schedule is genuinely demanding and cooking feels like one stress too many. And he has about $34,000 spread across a savings account and a small brokerage account he opened during the 2021 everything rally and hasn't really touched since. After 6 years of earning conservatively around $870,000 in gross income, Marcus has a net worth of roughly $41,000, not counting his car, which is leased and therefore owns nothing, and his apartment, which he doesn't own either. Now meet Diane. She's 41, lives outside Columbus, Ohio. She's a high school vice principal, makes $79,000 a year, has made somewhere in that range for the past 12 years. She owns a 3-bedroom house she bought in 2016 for $188,000. Her mortgage payment is $1,140 a month. She maxes her 403b every year. $23,000. Drives a 2019 Honda CR-V she bought used and paid off 18 months ago, and takes one real vacation a year, usually domestic, usually planned 8 months in advance so she can get the prices down. Her net worth right now, including home equity, retirement accounts, and a small taxable brokerage she's been adding to since 2020, is approximately $340,000. Marcus earns $66,000 more per year than Diane. Diane is worth 8 times more than Marcus. That is not a rounding error. That is not a fluke of timing or inheritance, or luck, though timing helped her on the house. That is the output of two completely different relationships with money operating at the same time in the same country. And understanding the structural difference between those two relationships is the only thing that actually changes the trajectory. So what happened to Marcus? Because Marcus isn't irresponsible, he's not gambling, he's not making obviously stupid decisions, he's just trapped. Specifically, he's inside 3 traps simultaneously, and each one is invisible precisely because it arrived dressed as something reasonable. The first one. Every time Marcus's income went up, his life got more expensive at roughly the same rate. The apartment upgrade when he hit $130,000, the lease instead of the used car, because at this income level, it just, made sense. The dinners out that started as occasional and became structural. The subscriptions that accumulated because individually each one was $15 and collectively they're $340 a month. This is lifestyle inflation, and the reason it's so effective as a trap is that none of it feels like a choice in the moment. It feels like a natural consequence of getting somewhere. You earn more, so you live better. That's the deal. That's what the money is for. Except here's what it actually does mathematically. Marcus earns $145,000. After federal taxes, state taxes, and FICA, he takes home roughly $8,900 a month. His fixed monthly costs, rent, car, insurance, subscriptions, minimum debt payments, consume about $5,800. The remaining $3,100 goes to food, entertainment, travel, incidentals, and whatever's left, which in practice is not much. His savings rate is somewhere around 4 to 6% of gross income, almost entirely locked inside the 401k match. Everything else gets absorbed. Now, here's the number that should sit uncomfortably. If Marcus had kept his lifestyle at the level it was when he was earning $95,000, a perfectly comfortable life by any measure, and directed the difference between $95,000 and $145,000 in after-tax income toward wealth building, he'd be adding roughly $2,800 to $3,200 a month to assets. Over 6 years at a 7% return, that's approximately $260,000 instead of $41,000. The gap between those two numbers isn't income. It's the tax that lifestyle inflation levies on every raise you ever receive. Yes. Sis. The second trap is quieter and in some ways more permanent. Marcus doesn't own anything that generates value while he sleeps. His apartment generates value for his landlord. His car generates value, like for the leasing company. His 401k is the one exception, and it's genuinely working, but it's working at 4% of his income when it could legally work at 16% or more. Almost everything Marcus spends money on is a consumption expense. It costs money. It provides value in the moment, and then it's gone. There's no residual. Nothing compounds. Diane's house just sat there for 9 years and appreciated from $188,000 to approximately $310,000. That's $122,000 in net worth she generated by making a mortgage payment that was cheaper than renting the same house. Her 403b has been compounding for 12 years, some of those years at maximum contribution. Those assets are working whether she's working or not. That's the fundamental structural difference between people who build wealth and people who don't. Wealthy people And I mean, actually wealthy, not high earning, own things that generate returns passively. Everyone else rents their lifestyle from people who do. This doesn't require being rich to start. Diane wasn't. It requires making asset ownership the first priority that income serves rather than the last thing it gets to if anything's left over. And in Marcus's life, asset ownership is always the last thing, which is, well, another way of saying it never really happens. Yeah, the third trap is the one nobody wants to talk about because it requires a kind of self-examination that is genuinely uncomfortable to do in a YouTube video. Emotional spending, not reckless spending, not addiction, just the completely understandable, deeply human tendency to use money to manage the psychological weights of a demanding life. Marcus works hard. His job is genuinely stressful. The dinners out aren't just about food, they're decompression. The trips aren't just vacation, they're the thing that makes the grind feel worth it. The apartment isn't just shelter, it's the physical evidence that the sacrifice is producing something. I'm not saying any of those things are wrong. I mean, I'm saying that when they collectively consume the margin between income and wealth building, they become the mechanism by which a high salary stays broke. The money that was supposed to compound is instead doing emotional labor, and emotional labor doesn't compound. It just gets consumed and then needs to be consumed again next month. And this is why high income broke is so stable as a condition. The more stressful the job that produces the income, the more legitimate the emotional need to spend the income on relief. It's self-reinforcing in a way that has nothing to do with discipline or character. It has to do with the fact that nobody built a release valve into the system. So the money becomes the release valve by default. Okay. So here's where we actually change something, because I've described the problem clearly enough that sitting with it any longer starts to feel like a stress delivery mechanism. And that's not the point. The fix isn't a budget. I want to be specific about that because make a budget is the personal finance advice equivalent of drink more water. Yeah, technically true, practically useless for the people who need it most because budgets require ongoing willpower, and willpower is exactly the resource that high-earning, high-stress people are most depleted of. What works instead is a structure that runs without willpower. 3 buckets, not categories, not line items, 3 buckets. And the buckets get filled in order automatically the day income arrives before the emotional math of the current week gets to vote on anything. The first bucket is spend. This is not the shame bucket. This is the intentional living bucket. It covers housing, transportation, food, utilities, the things that constitute your actual life. The constraint is that it has to be sized against what you actually earn, not what you earn minus whatever's left after everything else. Nowadays, for most people like carrying high fixed costs, this bucket needs to shrink before the other two can work. Not dramatically, but the $3,100 apartment on a take home that doesn't support it is the single most expensive decision in Marcus's financial life. Not the dinners, not the trips, the fixed costs that can't flex in a bad month. The second bucket is debt elimination if you're carrying high interest consumer debt, credit cards, personal loans, anything above 8%. This bucket exists to kill it. Fast and sequence, highest rate first. Not minimum payments, not a little extra. The actual monthly payment that eliminates the balance in 12 to 18 months. This is temporary. The bucket goes away when the debt goes away. That's That's the whole point. It's not a permanent feature of your financial life. It's a sprint that ends. The third bucket is asset ownership. This is the one that actually builds the wealth. 401k, IRA, index funds in a taxable brokerage, real estate, if the math works in your market. This bucket gets funded before the spend bucket has a chance to expand and absorb it, not after you see what's left. Before. The automation is the entire mechanism, because the psychological experience of money you never see is completely different from the experience of money you hold in your checking account and then consciously decide to invest. The first requires no willpower. The second requires a decision you have to remake every single month against a backdrop of everything else happening in your life. The split between these three buckets is going to be different for everyone, but the sequence is not. Spend bucket first, because you have to know your actual fixed costs before anything else makes sense. Debt bucket second, if it exists, because 22% interest is the highest guaranteed return available to you, and eliminating it is more valuable than investing while carrying it. Asset bucket third, and it goes in before the spend bucket is allowed to creep. Not after, before. Here's the thing that I want to leave you with, and I mean this without any of the motivational veneer that personal finance content usually packages it in. The difference between Marcus and Diane is not talent. It's not income. Obviously, since Diane earned significantly less, gang, it's not luck, though timing helped. It's that Diane built a financial structure before she built a lifestyle, and Marcus built a lifestyle before he thought about financial structure. And by the time the structure question became urgent, the lifestyle had consumed all the margin. You can reverse that in either order, but reversing it after the lifestyle is already in place requires shrinking something that has come to feel like a baseline. That's harder. Not impossible, genuinely harder, because the apartment that felt like a reward when you first signed the lease feels like a right by year 3. The car that felt like an upgrade feels like a standard by year 2. Lifestyle inflation doesn't just consume money, it resets your reference point for what normal feels like. And then anything below normal feels like deprivation, even when it's actually fine. The most expensive thing Marcus ever bought wasn't the apartment or the car. It was the story that his income level entitled him to a particular life experience. That story cost him conservatively $250,000 in the 6 years he's been earning well. And it'll cost him more in the 6 years ahead if the structure doesn't change. The good news, and I want to end on something that's actually true and not just encouraging, is that the 3-bucket system doesn't require Marcus to become a different person. It doesn't require deprivation, it requires automation and sequencing. Put the buckets in the right order, fund them before the spend bucket gets a vote, and then live on what's left. The lifestyle adjusts. It always adjusts. Humans are so extraordinarily good at finding contentment at almost any spending level once the decision is made, and the optionality is removed. The salary was never the problem, the structure was, and structure, unlike income, is something you can actually control starting today.